The chamber of the Galactic Assembly had never known silence like this. 72 hours of desperate, round-the-clock negotiations had collapsed into a vacuum of sound, a void where hope used to be. Ambassador Janice Thorne stood at the central dais, her simple Navy uniform a stark contrast to the flowing robes, bioluminescent skin, and exoskeletal plating of the alien dignitaries surrounding her. The air, recycled and sterile, tasted of defeat. On the main viewer, a live feed from the edge of the Sagittarius Arm played on a loop. It showed a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever assembled. The KLeth Confluence, a species of crystalline entities who had conquered 1,000 worlds over 10,000 years, had finally turned their full, terrible gaze toward the one species that had consistently refused their offers of integration: humanity. The Kaleth ships were not built. They were grown. They were massive fractal structures of living crystal, pulsating with an inner light that was both beautiful and horrifying. Their weapons didn't just destroy matter, they disrupted the very bonds of reality, unraveling ships and planets into clouds of inert dust. They had never known defeat. "Our calculations are complete," droned the representative from the Xylos Federation, his gelatinous form quivering inside a containment suit. "The Kaleth war fleet outmasses your entire naval capacity by a factor of 400. Their primary weapon has a theoretical yield we cannot fully model. Admiral, your continued resistance is not a military strategy. It is a biological imperative for your species to self-terminate. Sign the unconditional surrender. It is the only logical course of action." A murmur of grim agreement rippled through the assembly. This was what they did. They calculated, they analyzed, and they surrendered to the inevitable. It was the galactic way. And survival of the fittest meant survival of the smartest, which meant knowing when to capitulate. Admiral Cole Masterson, a man whose face was a roadmap of campaigns fought in the cold, merciless dark, had remained silent for 3 days. He had listened to their logic, their pleas, their thinly veiled contempt for a species that still fought with primitive kinetics and reaction-based drives. Now he stepped forward, his boots making a dull, solid sound on the polished metal floor, a sound of weight and presence that the other delegates seemed to lack. His voice was not loud, but it carried a density that silenced the murmurs. "You're right. By your math, we're already dead. Our fleet is outnumbered. Our weapons are primitive by your standards. Our admirals are flesh and blood, not hive-mind intelligences." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You see a war. How do you see ships and weapons and power differentials?" He turned his back on the viewer, on the image of humanity's doom, and faced the assembly directly. "What you don't see is a soldier. For 1,000 years we fought each other," Masterson continued, his voice hardening. "We fought with sticks and stones, with swords and gunpowder, with atomic fire and cyber warfare. We learned to fight in the mud, in the mountains, in the deserts, and in the void. We learned that the measure of a soldier is not the power of his gun, but the conviction in his heart. We learned that when everything is stripped away, the ships, the tech, the strategies, the final variable is the will to stand your ground." He pointed a finger at the gelatinous Xylos delegate. "Your people merged into a collective to avoid conflict. You," he said, turning to a tall avian creature, "evolved flight as your primary defense. Your entire galactic society is built on avoiding the fight. You negotiate, you compromise, you surrender. Because for you, the continuation of your existence is the only goal. For us, it's not the only goal. It's not even the primary one." A flicker of confusion ran through the assembly. What could be more important than survival? "Our primary goal," Masterson said, his voice dropping to a near whisper that was perfectly audible in the rapt silence, "is to make sure that if we go, that we take the bastards who did it with us. You see a hopeless battle. We see the chance to make a point." He activated a secondary display. On it was not a fleet, but a single battered ship. It was a heavy cruiser, the last stand, its hull scarred by debris and patched with salvaged metal. It was a flying testament to human resilience, and it was rigged with a prototype FTL drive that had been stripped of all safety protocols. "See, the Kaleth fleet will have to advance through the Chiron corridor," Masterson explained. "It's a gravity shoal. Their maneuvering will be restricted. Their massive crystalline formations will be a liability, forcing them into a predictable line of advance. At the head of that line, we will place the last stand. Her captain is a woman named Helena Vance. She has a crew of 47 volunteers. They have no weapons that can meaningfully harm a Kaleth dreadnought." He let the absurdity of the statement sink in. A single, unarmed ship against the tip of an invincible spear. "When the Kaleth fleet enters weapons range," Masterson said, his voice now iron, "they will target the last stand. It's what they do. They eliminate the obstacle, but instead of firing, Captain Vance will engage her FTL drive, not to escape, to jump into the heart of their command ship." The logic was insane. But an FTL jump required precise calculations and empty space. Jumping into a solid object was unthinkable. The result would be a catastrophic release of energy. The last stand would be instantly annihilated. So would the Kaleth command ship, and a significant portion of the fleet clustered around it. "But they'll see it coming," a delegate from a reptilian race hissed. "They will scan the ship, see the unstable drive core, and destroy it from a distance." Masterson almost smiled. "They'll try. But the last stand has no active power signature. We've bled her reactors dry. Her FTL drive is cold. It's just a big, heavy piece of junk. They'll have no reason to prioritize it. They'll focus on our main fleet, which will be making a very noisy, very visible last stand a few million kilometers away. They'll think the last stand is just a derelict, a piece of debris. It won't be until our main fleet is engaged and their attention is fixed that Captain Vance will get her order. One word. Now. It's suicide," the Xylos delegate stated flatly. "Yes," Masterson agreed. "It's the kind of math your computers can't process. 47 lives to shatter the backbone of an invincible fleet, to turn their perfect formation into a graveyard, to prove that the price of conquering humanity is not paid in ships or resources, but in blood, our blood. And if we have to pay it, we will ensure that you pay it right alongside us. Every single one of you, if that's what it takes." He looked around the chamber, his gaze meeting each of them in turn. "You wanted us to surrender, to become a protectorate, to live, but you don't understand. We're not interested in just living. We're interested in being free, and we will pay any price for that. Any price." The silence that followed was different. It was no longer the silence of despair, but the silence of stunned recalculation. And the galactic equation had just been fed a variable it had never encountered before, a species for whom self-preservation was not the prime directive. In the cold, silent belly of the last stand, Captain Helena Vance drifted in 0G, her eyes closed. The ship was a tomb. No hum of engines, no whisper of life support. The air was stale and cold. She and her 47 volunteers were in skin suits, breathing from personal tanks, their body heat the only warmth in their compartments. They were ghosts, and waiting for the signal to become legends. Her crew were not wide-eyed zealots. They were engineers, cooks, comms officers, and gunnery sergeants without guns. They were people who understood the math as well as the Xylos delegate did. They knew they would die. They had all written letters home, recorded messages for children they would never see again. They had made their peace. Vance's mind drifted to her own daughter, a cadet at the Lunar Defense Academy, and she thought of the last letter she'd written, tucking it into her locker. "We do this so you don't have to. We do this so the word surrender never enters your vocabulary. Be brave. Be human." A soft chime in her helmet. A text-only message on her heads-up display. No encryption, no fanfare. Just one word from Admiral Masterson. Now. Vance opened her eyes. "All right, you miserable bastards," she said over the suit-to-suit comm, her voice calm. "Party time. Strap in." 47 souls scrambled through the dark ship, latching themselves into acceleration couches that would offer no protection from what was to come. Vance made her way to the bridge. It was a cavern of dead screens. She floated to the command chair, a relic from a decommissioned dreadnought, and strapped herself in. In front of her was a single, jury-rigged control panel with one large red button. "Sir, the Kaelith fleet is entering the corridor," came a voice from her tactical officer, a young woman named Park, who was monitoring passive sensors from a dark corner. "They've taken the bait. Our main fleet is engaging. It's a slaughter, Captain." "Good," Vance said, her hand hovering over the button. "That means they're looking the other way." On the view screen, which was running on emergency backup power, she could see them. The Kaelith fleet was a constellation of jagged and beautiful light, stretching for thousands of kilometers. And at its very tip, the flagship. It was a monstrous, asymmetrical structure, kilometers long, pulsating with a malevolent intelligence. It was beautiful. It was the end of the world, and it was getting closer. Her hand rested on the cool metal of the button. It was surprisingly mundane. No safety cover, no dramatic lock. Just a button. She thought of all the hands that had built this ship, all the dreams that had sailed in it. And she thought of her daughter. "This is Captain Helena Vance of the Earth ship Last Stand," she said, keying her comms to an open, broad-spectrum channel. It was a futile gesture. The Kaelith had never acknowledged human communication. But it felt right. "We have a gift for you." She pressed the button. There was no sound in space. But for a single microsecond, the cold, dark heart of the Kaelith flagship was suddenly, impossibly, filled with the white-hot mass of a 40,000-ton heavy cruiser, and the cold equations of FTL travel met the cold equations of matter. The result was a tiny artificial star, born and died in the same instant. The flagship, a creature of perfect rigid crystal, simply shattered. The explosion was not just a blast. It was a cataclysm of shrapnel. Millions of crystalline shards, each the size of a building, were hurled outward at a significant fraction of the speed of light. They did not dissipate. They tore through the closely packed formation behind the flagship like a cosmic shotgun blast. The Kaelith fleet, so perfectly arrayed for their advance, became their own worst enemy. Dreadnoughts, their crystalline hulls designed to withstand energy weapons, were not built to resist kinetic impacts of this magnitude. They cracked, they spun, they collided with each other. The beautiful, orderly light show became a cascade of destruction, a chain reaction of chaos spreading through their ranks. On the bridge of the flagship Aegis, Admiral Masterson watched the impossible unfold on his main screen. The Kaelith Vanguard, the terrifying spear tip that was supposed to pierce Earth's heart, had simply evaporated. It was replaced by a spreading cloud of glittering debris. For a moment, there was silence on the bridge. Then, a young ensign whispered, "My God, they did it." The surviving Kaelith ships, and their command structure obliterated, their perfect formation in ruins, were in disarray. They were not a hive mind. They were a hierarchy. Without the flagship to issue orders, they were individuals, suddenly afraid. They began to pull back, to regroup, to try and make sense of what had just happened. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Kaelith confluence had hesitated. And in that hesitation, Admiral Masterson saw his opening. "All ships," he said, his voice cutting through the shock on his own bridge. "All ships forward, maximum burn, target the stragglers. Let them know we're coming. Let them know that for every world they've conquered, for every species they've crushed, there is a price, and we are here to collect." The human fleet, outgunned, outmatched, and outnumbered, surged forward. They were not charging to victory. They were charging to make the Kaelith pay for every inch of space they took. and they were going to show the galaxy what the soldier of man looked like. In the Galactic Assembly, the silence was absolute. The viewer now showed not the terrifying image of an invincible fleet, but a chaotic debris field. The delegates watched as the tiny, insignificant human ships harried the edges of the retreating Kaeleth armada, their primitive kinetics tearing into the wounded crystalline giants. Ambassador Thorne still stood at the dais. She looked at the Xylos delegate. His gelatinous form was completely still, his internal calculations apparently yielding no result. He had no framework for this. "It's called resolve," Thorne said quietly, her voice filling the stunned chamber. "You can't calculate it. You can't scan for it. You can't predict it. It's what happens when a species decides that some things are worth dying for. And when you find a species like that," she said, turning to leave, "you don't try to conquer them. Hey, you get out of their way." She walked out of the assembly, the sound of her footsteps the only noise in the vast, silent hall. She was leaving behind a room full of beings who had just learned a new variable. They had learned that in the cold, dark universe, there was one thing more terrifying than an invincible fleet. A soldier who showed no hesitation,